Combat Mission Shock Force is a tactical level war game set in a fictional NATO/coalition invasion of Syria in order to contextualize a modern setting for a Desert Storm type of war game. In this scenario, we control a rear area NATO reserve force tasked with garrisoning a strategic bridge and highway area. A Syrian mechanized formation has broken through the front lines and are approaching our position. We control a multinational force in this scenario of German, Dutch, US, and later Canadian forces. They garrison key compounds surrounding the highway area. Communication and C2 are abstracted within the game. It will be important for our units to provide each other with spotting information and ideally mutual fire support. Our briefing notes at least 2 mechanized Syrian deployments. Our objective will be to deny the opponent key objectives marked in green and to evade reinforcements. A tank platoon is approximately 20 minutes away. The scenario ends in either 45 minutes, plus or minus some unknown amount of time, or when one of the forces decide to surrender. The game is played on either 1-minute simultaneous turns or in real time. The combat is 1-to-1. For this AAR, I use 1-minute turns. In the turn-based mode, players observe the previous 1 minute of combat and issue orders for the successive turn. Our forces are composed of mechanized infantry and various IFVs. The terrain is mostly flat, composed of small forested areas and scattered urban compounds. Along the edges of the map, there are concealed routes advanced to each of the objectives. The Dutch man the foremost objectives, the former police station across the highway and the Halal Bazaar. They contain a few CV-9035 IFVs with 35mm autocannons. I order all infantry units to hold fire until below 250 meters. I face our IFVs to likely routes advance. The Germans hold the lumber yard. They have a few Marder IFVs with 20mm autocannons and ATGM capacity. The US holds the Sheikh Hamad compound with Bradley AFVs. The compounds offer sufficient concealment. Given enough spotting communication, I intend that the IFVs do much of the heavy lifting. I intend that the infantry do much of the spotting, ideally unseen. We obtain contact a couple minutes into the scenario. The contacts here are rather speculative. They represent general hunches of our troops. In this context, they may represent sound contacts of tracked vehicles moving or some combination of intuition and scattered visual contact. We obtain real contact shortly after. The opponent appears to be caught unawares. Inferring from the observed units, they appear to be a company of typical BMP infantry. At this range, our forces are approximately evenly matched. All vehicles can pose a threat to each other, and all infantry units are likely to be armed with some sort of AT. Deploying vehicles near cover can be difficult in combat mission. Not all trees can necessarily block line of sight. Luckily in this map, the scenario designer have placed various avenues that guide placement. In this placement, my Marder IFV has a small pinhole to draw line of sight and line of fire through. The lumberyard has weathered the first assault well. After causing numerous losses to the BMP column, our opponent regroups and musters enough infantry to push back against their IFVs. Some discrepancies occur between my save files between play and recording. In my game, the lead martyr was not destroyed, but lost all weapon functionality due to the RPG attacks. While our IFVs pull back slightly, our opponent regroups the surviving forces and deploys smoke to mask their infantry's assault into the trees surrounding the lumberyard. Across the map, I move some Bradley IFVs from the US compound to support. In the meantime, Dutch forces posted closer to the bridge obtained contact with the second mechanized deployment Syrian forces. The reinforcing enemy forces appear to be avoiding the Dutch positions to strike at the US position. The Dutch forces in the former police post have excellent concealment and lines of fire on their line of advance. I repositioned the IFVs at the former police post to engage any BMPs seen from that position. Meanwhile, near the lumberyard, the initial Syrian force has started to stall. Despite that, a BMP starts to draw fire onto German infantry held within the lumberyard. They have exhausted their AT ammunition at this point and are starting to be pinned. It is extremely risky to maneuver the martyrs to support. At such close ranges, spotting is key. Given the smoke and the tree cover, the stationary party has the advantage. I decide to call in support with our 120mm mortars spotted from the US position to hopefully button the remaining BMPs. Nevertheless, both Syria's advances have been sufficiently blunted. I intend to await our tank reinforcements to mop up the remaining BMPs. None of the ground objectives could be considered contested at this point. At range, I can pick off the remaining BMPs and ignore the straggler infantry. Some straggler infantry have survived the destruction of the second BMP column and are seen moving towards the US position. The Bradley IFVs mop these up quickly. One thing to note here, I sent a single Bradley IFV to the Forest Ridge early in the scenario. It was caught by the first BMP wave while en route. Soon after, the Canadian tank reinforcements start to arrive. We are reinforced by a platoon of Leopard 2 tanks. 3 of the 4 tanks have some standoff or slat armor used to defeat shaped charges such as ATGMs and RPGs. At the same time, 2 more columns of BMPs start from the corners of the opposite side of the map start to arrive. The immediate BMP column appears to be approaching the Halal Bazaar manned by Dutch forces. I deploy the first Leopard 2s to fire upon the approaching BMPs. I deploy the latter to counter the second reinforcing BMP column a bit farther off. At the Halal Bazaar, overwatch from the Leopard tanks allows us to redeploy some of the CVIFVs to spot the second inbound column. They appear to be headed towards the former police post. Specifically, they intend to deploy in a small orchard/forested area just outside the former police post. A ridge separates our Leopard 2s from the remaining column of BMPs. At such close ranges, the Leopard tanks are still vulnerable to fire to the rear and possibly the flanks. Even frontal fire is risky, as it may induce the crew to bail out or panic. I cautiously maneuver the tanks to crest over the ridge gradually. We appear to have missed much of the column with our Leopard 2 tanks. I ordered the tanks to pull back. I suspect that the remaining BMPs are deploying infantry in the orchard and bit of forest. Currently, I check up on the US and German forces, now mostly unengaged. I try to reposition some of the IFVs posted further back to provide supporting fire. Remember that the Bradley IFVs and the Marder IFVs used by German and US forces have ATGM capability. At this time, Dutch forces at the Halal Bazaar spot Syrian tanks on the opposite side of the bridge. They appear to be moving into supporting the remaining BMP column, assembling outside the former police post objective. I decide to call in our remaining mortar support to button T-72s. Originally, I had intended to wait out the remaining BMPs. I intend to destroy the remaining Syrian forces in a sort of coup de main. When our mortars finish their spotting fires, I hope that the combined effect of smoke and buttoning will allow our Leopard 2s and the remaining Dutch IFVs to surge forwards and engage the Syrian forces while they are most disrupted. Our forces have better infrared spotting capabilities, which may give us a slight edge in spotting through the dust and the smoke and dust thrown up by the mortar strikes and disabled vehicles. Nevertheless, I expect this to be a highly risky maneuver. The US forces and German forces held back in reserve will be able to defend the remaining objectives sufficiently until the end of the match. If we are able to overpower the Syrian tanks and remaining BMPs here, This will bring a quick end to the scenario.
Achtung, Aufschlag, kommen! Flash out. Abgefeuert, kommen! Abgefeuert, Ende! Wirkungsschießen, kommen! Verstanden. Achtung, Aufschlag, kommen! Aufschlag, Ende! Abgefeuert, kommen! Abgefeuert, Ende! Achtung, Aufschlag, kommen! Abgefeuert, Ende!
In the end, this was a major victory with the complete destruction of a large Syrian formation. Thank you for watching.